Hi there. My name is Victoria Chen. I'm 34 years old, and I'm about to share a story that will probably make you feel uncomfortable, angry, and maybe even a little bit seen. Before we dive in, please like this video and listen to my story till the end. Let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. It means everything to know you're here. Last week, something happened that broke something inside me. Something that had been cracking slowly for years, but I just wasn't ready to see it. My mom didn't even bother to pick me up at the airport. I had just spent 10 years of my life abroad, sacrificing everything, my time, my health, my future, paying off her $2 million debt. 10 years. That's a whole childhood, a whole life, compressed into shifts in the ICU, trembling fingers on a keyboard sending money, and nights when I couldn't sleep because I was doing math problems in my head. And she couldn't show up to get me from the airport. I was standing by the arrivals curb in Las Vegas, holding my suitcase, watching other families rush into each other's arms. The air was that dry Vegas heat that feels like it's sucking the moisture right out of you. Families were lighting up, hugging, crying happy tears. And there I was, alone. My phone buzzed. My heart jumped. Maybe it was her. Maybe she was running late. No call. No text saying she was on her way. Just a Facebook notification. Just a small red bubble that changed everything. At the top of my feed was a photo of my mom and my little sister on a beach. They were laughing. Actually laughing. Drinks in their hands, matching sunglasses on, her arm wrapped around my sister like she was the only child that mattered. The only one. The caption hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. Mom's precious daughter. I stood there in the Nevada heat, suitcase in one hand, phone in the other, and something in me went very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a storm. 10 years of double shifts. 10 years of sending money home so they wouldn't lose the house. 10 years of believing that my sacrifice meant something. And it suddenly looked different in my head. Like I'd been watching the wrong movie the whole time. I scrolled through the comments on that photo. Heart emojis. You deserve this getaway. Cutest duo. Nobody in that post knew who had actually paid for that trip. Nobody knew that the woman making the comments probably worked 5 days a week while her daughter was watching her make memories without her. My hands were shaking. Actually shaking. I slipped my phone to my ear and called my bank's international line. The woman who answered had one of those pleasant customer service voices, the kind you hear thousands of times in your life and never really listen to. I listened to every word she said. With a steady voice that didn't sound like mine, I said just 6 words. Cancel every card in her name. I don't know if that made sense to her. I don't know if she heard the 10 years in those 6 words. The sleepless nights. The patience I couldn't save because I was too tired. The time I lost. The version of myself I gave away. But she heard the authority. And she did it. 10 minutes later, my mom finally called. Her voice was shaking. They were accusing her of fraud. Her card was locked. She was begging me to fix it. But all I could think about was the pool. And the drinks. And the matching sunglasses. This is happening, I said, my voice calm and flat, because you earned it. If you've ever felt completely and utterly used by your own family, if you've ever stood in an airport and realized that the person who gave you life doesn't actually see you as a person, you won't want to miss what happened next. Stay with me until the end to hear exactly how the payback played out, and more importantly, how I finally took my own life back. By the time I was standing outside that airport, I had already lived through a whole lifetime of being the responsible one. But let me take you back to the beginning, because context is everything. You can't understand how someone ends up at the airport, standing alone with evidence of theft in their suitcase, unless you understand how they got there. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. And for a while, things were good. My mother, her name was Elena, and she was nothing like the woman I saw in that pool photo. She packed my lunches. She showed up to every single school play, even the ones where I had no lines and just stood in the back. She worked as a receptionist at a dentist office. She had this laugh that filled up the whole house. My dad was a mechanic who smelled like oil and coffee. And every single time he came through the door after a long day, he would say the same thing. As long as we stick together, we will be fine. For a while, we were fine. Then change came the way it always does. Slowly. So slowly you don't even notice until you look back and realize you're somewhere completely different. My dad got sick. I remember the moment everything shifted. Not because there was some dramatic diagnosis or a doctor giving bad news, but because I watched him walk from the bedroom to the kitchen and have to stop halfway to catch his breath. A man who used to throw me up in the air at the pool suddenly couldn't climb the stairs without leaning against the wall. Hospital bills. Tests. More bills. The money my parents had saved, the little bit of security they'd built, it just evaporated. Doctor's appointments became groceries, and groceries became medical equipment. The house that used to feel solid, like it would always be there, suddenly felt fragile. Built on sand. And we were all just watching it shift under our feet. I was young enough to not fully understand what was happening, but old enough to hear my parents arguing about money in the kitchen late at night. Old enough to know that the stress was killing him as much as whatever was in his body. After he died, my mom was not the same woman who used to dance in the kitchen on Saturday mornings. Grief does something to people. It hollows them out. It makes them vulnerable in ways they can't control. And sometimes, when people are desperate and hollow and scared, they make choices they wouldn't normally make. Las Vegas started to show up in our lives. When I was in high school, my mom announced that we were moving. She said there were more job opportunities there. She said a fresh start would be good for all of us. She made it sound like a new beginning. What I didn't realize at the time was that Las Vegas was where all the slot machines were. Las Vegas was where you could convince yourself that one more spin would change everything. In Vegas, the sun felt harsher. The city was louder. Casinos were everywhere, like bright magnets pulling at anyone who was even a little bit desperate. And my mom was desperate. Grief-stricken. Alone with 2 kids, she was terrified of failing. She got a job at a dental clinic. On paper, it sounded stable. In reality, her paycheck barely hit the account before it went straight back out. Bills, sure, but also something else. Something that had hooks in her now. At first, she went to the casino with friends from work just for fun. A few hours at the slots, a free drink, a story to tell on Monday. But then came the night that changed everything. She called me from the casino floor, and I will never forget the sound of her voice. It was alive in a way I hadn't heard it since my dad was alive. "Sweetheart, I turned $20 into $800 in one night. Can you believe that?" I remember feeling this strange mix of hope and unease twist together in my stomach. Maybe this was the break she kept begging the universe for. Maybe we would finally stop drowning. I actually believed that. I believed that luck could save us. I had no idea that night was the last time it would ever feel like luck. Next part coming up, and trust me, this is where things start to get dark. After that first win, everything changed. The calls sounded different. She would call me and her voice had this desperate edge to it. She would tell me she had been so close to winning big. So close. Just needed a little more to make it back. Just one more night. I can still hear that hope in her voice mixed with something darker. Something hungry. She started using credit cards. She told herself she would pay them off when the big win came. She actually believed that. She wasn't lying to herself out of malice. She was lying to herself out of desperation. When you're drowning, you'll grab at anything that floats. The problem was, the casinos are designed so that nothing floats. Instead, the balances grew. Interest piled on interest. Late fees stacked up like bodies. I watched her chase the same fantasy over and over. And I watched it destroy her. She started losing sleep. Then losing weight. Then losing any sense of what was real and what was the promise the casinos kept making to her. "You're so close. Just try again. You almost had it." By the time I graduated nursing school, the situation was no longer fixable by normal people doing normal things. The house was one missed payment away from disappearing. And I knew what that meant. I knew what it meant to have nothing. I'd seen it happen to patients' families in the ICU. I'd seen people lose everything in the time it takes a heart to stop beating. I took the first job I could find in an intensive care unit back in Dallas. I was 23 years old. The youngest nurse on a floor where most people had 20 years of experience. I was working nights, which meant I was more familiar with dying strangers than with my own family. But the pay was decent. The pay was a start. Every time I called home, my mom sounded a little more frantic. The mortgage is behind. The credit cards are maxed out. Collection agencies keep calling. They scare me, honey. They call at weird hours and say things that feel like threats. She was painting a picture of complete financial devastation. And maybe it was true. Or maybe some of it was exaggerated because she needed my help and guilt is a powerful motivator. I would learn later that it was both. When she finally told me the actual number, that she was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, I felt my stomach literally drop. Like I was falling and there was nothing to catch me. I did what the oldest children in messed up families always do. I made a promise I didn't know I was signing my future away to make. I will fix it, I said. Those 4 words changed everything. I picked up extra shifts. I stopped spending money on myself completely. No new clothes. No vacations. No nights out with the other nurses who seemed to have lives that didn't revolve around sacrifice. I sent money every month. Sometimes half my paycheck. Sometimes more. Sometimes I would look at my account balance and just transfer it all. It still wasn't enough. The debt was like a living thing. It kept growing no matter what I fed it. Then a recruiter called me about a travel nurse position. Dubai. A hospital desperate for experienced ICU nurses. The pay was almost double what I was making in Texas, plus housing covered. I stared at that number on the email for probably 5 minutes, just reading it over and over. For the first time, wiping out the debt didn't feel like a fantasy. It felt like math. If I worked there for a few years, lived cheaply, sent most of it home, my mom would keep the house. We could breathe again. She could get help. Everything could stabilize. When I told her, she cried. She actually wept. Like I had just pulled her out of a burning building with my bare hands. My little sister, who was still a teenager then, got excited. She talked about visiting me someday, about posting pictures from the other side of the world. The idea that I was making a sacrifice was somehow romantic to her. She didn't understand yet what it meant to live your whole life for someone else. I remember standing in the airport for that first flight out. My entire life stuffed into 2 suitcases. I told myself this was temporary. 2 years, maybe 3. Pay the debt, stabilize things, come home to a family that was grateful and finally safe. That was the plan. I had no idea I was about to spend the next decade of my life on an airplane that never actually landed. I had no idea that every sacrifice I made would only create room for new ones. But I boarded that plane anyway, with hope in my chest and a promise on my lips that would slowly destroy me. And the worst part, I did it willingly. I thought I was saving them. I thought I was the hero of this story. I was so wrong about that. The first year in Dubai nearly broke me. The ICU was a constant state of emergency. 12-hour shifts became 14. Nights blurred into days until I couldn't remember what it felt like to sleep in actual darkness. I learned how to function on caffeine and adrenaline and the steady beeping of monitors that tracked people at the edge of life and death. When my paycheck hit, I would transfer a huge chunk straight back to my mom. Every single time I did, she thanked me like I had saved her life all over again. She always promised it was almost over. After this bill. After that loan was cleared. After just one more payment. I wanted to believe her so badly that I ignored the parts that didn't quite add up. The quick trips she kept taking with my sister. The new phone my sister posted online. The way the total debt never seemed to go down as fast as the money I was sending out. It was like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom, except someone kept making the hole bigger. Whenever I asked why things were still so bad, my mom had an answer ready. Always. There was always a medical bill I had never heard about. A home repair that had gone wrong. Some new fee from the bank. She made the debt sound like a living thing that kept growing no matter what she did. And I believed her because I wanted to. Because the alternative, that she was lying to me, was too painful to consider. Meanwhile, my sister started posting more polished pictures. New sneakers. Weekends in Los Angeles for some event. Manicures that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. And then, then came the poolside photos. Resort photos. Hotel rooms with city views. Party outfits. Little captions about working hard and playing harder. Hashtags about grinding and deserving the best. Every time I saw one of those posts, something twisted inside me. But I told myself a story about how she was paying for it. Maybe she had a part-time job I didn't know about. Maybe brands were sending her things for free. Influencers get stuff comped all the time, right? I clung to that explanation like it was a life raft. It was easier to believe that than to imagine my mom taking the money I bled for and pouring it right back into the same hole that had almost swallowed us. In the rare weeks when I wasn't drowning at the hospital, I would sit at my small kitchen table in Dubai and open a spreadsheet on my laptop. I listed out every transfer I had made, every promise my mom had given me, every rough number she had thrown at me for how much was left. On paper, it looked like we should have been close to the finish line. But the way she talked, it was like we had barely taken a step. Like I had gotten on a treadmill and she kept turning up the speed. Any time I tried to press her for real documents, actual proof, she got defensive. She would say things like, "You don't trust me anymore after everything I've gone through." Or, "I am your mother. I would never lie to you about something like this." The guilt hit me every single time. And I would back off. Close the spreadsheet. Tell myself to just keep my head down and keep working. That became my entire identity. Not Victoria the person. Not Victoria the nurse. Not Victoria with hobbies or relationships or dreams that didn't involve money transfers. Just Victoria, the daughter, the one who pays. I did not realize it yet, but that was the first part of the real damage. The money hurt, yes. The sleepless nights hurt. But losing the sense that I was allowed to live a life of my own, that was the part that would take the longest to fix. Then came a night that shattered the fragile illusions I'd been holding together. I had just finished a 12-hour shift in the ICU, the kind where everything blurs together. Alarms and codes and families crying in hallways. Families trying to say goodbye to people they loved. I got home, dropped my bag by the door like I had done 1,000 times before, and opened my banking app out of habit. The transfer to my mom had gone through 2 days earlier. I expected the same sinking feeling I always got when I saw my account take a hit. When I saw my money, the money I had bled for, leave my account. Instead, something else caught my eye. The amount I sent was almost exactly what she had told me she needed to keep the mortgage current. But when I scrolled through the activity on the joint account we used for payments, I saw something that made my stomach actually hurt. $1,000 at a resort in Los Angeles. 2 separate charges from a high-end restaurant on the Strip in Vegas. Multiple withdrawals at ATMs inside casinos. I stared at the screen, replaying our last phone call. She had cried about the bank being on her back. About late fees. About losing the house if we didn't catch up this month. She never once mentioned a trip. Not a word. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe the resort charge was a mistake. Maybe my sister was paying my mom back. Maybe. But deep down, I already knew. I was just waiting for permission to believe it. And the permission was about to come in ways I was not prepared for. Stay with me. This is where everything starts to fall apart. The breaking point didn't arrive with a dramatic fight. It showed up in an envelope like any other piece of mail. I got home from another long shift, kicked off my shoes, and noticed a stack of letters on my little table. Most were junk. One had my name printed in bold with a return address from a bank in the United States. I frowned. I didn't have any active accounts with them. At least not any I remembered opening. I ripped it open, expecting some marketing offer. What I found instead was a notice about a past due balance on a line of credit. My line of credit. A line of credit I never opened. It listed an address in Las Vegas that I hadn't lived at in over a decade. A phone number I didn't recognize. The minimum payment due was ridiculous. The total balance made my stomach twist. I felt that same cold clarity I had felt looking at my sister's videos. The kind of clarity that comes right before you have to make a choice you can't take back. I grabbed my phone and called the number on the letter. A woman in the collections department pulled up the account and started reading off details. My full name. My social security number. The Vegas address. The phone number. I interrupted her. I'm calling from Dubai. I've never applied for this. There was a pause. According to our records, this was opened in person. Application signed 3 years ago. She read me a name as the co-signer. My mother's full name. I hung up the phone without saying much of anything. For a full minute, I just stood there in my kitchen. Letter in one hand. Phone in the other. Feeling like the floor had shifted under me and I was about to fall through. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't miscommunication or confusion about bank paperwork. This was my mother taking my identity, the one thing that was completely and entirely mine, and using it like a spare credit card. That realization didn't make me angry right away. It made me numb. It made everything go very, very still. When I called my mom, she answered on the second ring. She sounded distracted and annoyed, like I had interrupted something fun. Hey, can I call you back? I'm about to head out. Out where? I asked. There was music and chatter in the background. Somewhere loud. The sound of people who didn't have to worry about what their name was worth. It doesn't matter. What's going on? You sound weird. I took a breath. Did you open a line of credit in my name 3 years ago? The silence that followed said more than any words ever could. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp. I can't believe you're throwing that in my face. She said the bankman told her it was just paperwork. That they needed another account to consolidate everything. That she only did it so we wouldn't lose the house. I pictured her sitting behind some desk at the bank, nodding along while a loan officer slid paperwork across the table, and thinking, if I just write Madison's name, no wait. If I just write my daughter's name, this whole mess goes away. Except the mess never went away. It just got transferred. To me. It attached itself to my future like a parasite. Mom, that is not just paperwork, I said, and my voice was shaking even though I was trying so hard to keep it steady. That is my life. That is my credit. If I ever want to buy a house or a car or even get a basic loan, they're going to look at this. You didn't even ask me. She started to cry. Right on cue. Like she had a timer. I was desperate. You weren't here. You don't understand how scary it is when collectors show up at your door. I did what I had to do for this family. That phrase. For this family. It had become a shield she hid behind whenever I got too close to the truth. This was the first time I didn't let it work. I am part of this family, I said quietly. You keep saying you did it for us, but all I see is you making choices that wreck my future so you don't have to face your own mistakes. She went quiet. Then she turned mean. If you had been here, I wouldn't have had to. Those words hit me like a slap. Like it was my fault for trying to save everyone. Like leaving the country to make enough money to keep them afloat was somehow abandonment. For the next few days, I moved through the ICU like a ghost. I still did my job. I still hung medications and calculated drips. But in my head, numbers kept running on a different loop. The thousands I had sent. The balances that never went down. The debts opened in my name. The truth was simple and ugly. My mom hadn't just taken advantage of my help. She had taken my identity and used it like a spare credit card. Like I was a resource to be exploited, not a daughter to be protected. A colleague of mine named Ethan saw me falling apart. He didn't try to fix it. He just asked the question that changed everything. What would your mom do if you weren't there? And I had to be honest. She would figure something out. She would get a second job. She would sell the house. She would talk to a financial advisor. She would face the mess she made instead of dumping it on me. That realization didn't magically flip a switch inside me. I didn't cut her off the next day. I did what I had always done. I tried to find a compromise. I told myself I would send money for a few more months, just until she caught up on the worst of it. I told myself my sister deserved a chance. I told myself I could handle a little more exhaustion. But something was different now. Something had broken and couldn't be put back together. Then my sister posted a video. It was a montage of her weekend in Los Angeles. Hotel suite. Marble bathroom. City lights behind her on a balcony. And at the end, she was clinking glasses with my mom. At that same resort whose name I had seen on the bank statement. The caption said, "Girls who hustle deserve to play." Girls who hustle. I was in the ICU, holding hands with patients who wouldn't make it through the night. I was drinking stale vending machine coffee at 3 in the morning. I was carrying the weight of my mom's choices while she toasted my sister for being the precious one. And I finally understood. I wasn't family. I was funding. I was the ATM machine in human form. And that night, standing there looking at that photo, I made a decision that would change everything. I walked back into the terminal, found a quiet corner away from the sliding doors, and I pulled up the number on the back of my debit card. When the automated system connected me to a human being, my voice sounded calm, almost detached, like I was talking about someone else's life. "My name is Victoria Chen. I need you to cancel every card and freeze every line of credit connected to my social security number and my mother's name." The woman asked me to verify my information. I gave her everything she needed. Then I told her about the letter, the Vegas address, the accounts I never opened. There was a pause, then a change in her tone that I recognized from my own job. The way people talk when they realize something serious is happening. "I'm going to connect you with our fraud department. Please stay on the line." While I waited, I watched families load into cars. Watched people roll their suitcases toward lives that made sense. Mine didn't. Not yet. But I could finally see a version of it that did. 10 minutes later, my mom called back. Her voice was panicked. "They're saying I committed fraud. My card isn't working. I'm at the checkout and it's declining. What did you do?" "I reported the accounts you opened in my name," I said. "The bank is investigating. They froze everything tied to my social." "How could you do this to me? Do you have any idea what you've done? I can't pay for the room. I can't get cash. You need to call them back and fix this right now." And for the first time in my entire life, instead of feeling like the bad guy, instead of feeling guilty, I felt something else entirely. I felt free. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not fixing this. You did this. I'm just refusing to cover it up for you anymore." I didn't realize it yet, but that moment at the airport, that decision to tell the truth instead of protect a lie, was my real revenge. Not watching her panic. Not seeing the consequences land. The real revenge was what came next. Over the next months, I worked with a lawyer. I filed reports. I got my credit frozen. I watched accounts get disputed and fraud investigations begin. My mom faced real consequences. Probation. Mandatory counseling for gambling addiction. Restitution payments that would follow her for years. But the real victory, the part that mattered. I got my life back. I moved to Denver. I took a job at a hospital with mountains instead of neon lights. I signed a lease on an apartment entirely in my own name. And when my paycheck came in, the money just stayed mine. No automatic transfers. No guilt. Just mine. Listen. If you're sitting there listening to this and some part of it feels uncomfortably familiar, if you see yourself in my story, I need you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to ask for proof. You are allowed to see the statements. You are allowed to say no, even if they call you selfish. You are allowed to protect your credit, your savings, your future. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you careful. Family is not the people who share your DNA. Family is the people who don't turn you into collateral. Family is the people who don't use your love as a weapon. And here's what I want to ask you. Tell me in the comments. Have you dealt with something similar? Maybe not exactly like this, but close enough that it hit you in the chest? Have you ever been the one holding everyone else up while they built their lives on your back? Share your story. Because I can promise you this, you are not alone. Not even a little bit. And if you found any part of this helpful, if you found yourself in these words, please subscribe. Because there are more stories coming. Stories about standing your ground. Stories about reclaiming your life. Stories about what it means to finally put yourself first. You deserve that. You deserve a life that's actually yours. Thank you for listening. From the bottom of my heart, thank you.